Hi, everyone. So, today we are going to be talking about the new executive action that just came out literally this week. I did a short on it, but listen, came out this week. We're going to talk about it. There's just so many misconceptions about what it is, and I want to talk to you about what it is and what it isn't because you all deserve to know what's going on and if this can help you in your immigration journey. Okay. I don't want you to be out here thinking it's one thing when it's not that. Okay. So, we're going to be talking about what this parole is, who it can help, and what situations it applies to. All right. And I will also be talking to you about how you can prepare to take advantage of this. All right. So, not just what it is, how you can prepare yourself to be ready to take advantage of it once it comes out and you can actually apply for it. All right. So, if you don't know me, I am attorney Lillian Chukura. I'm a U.S. immigration lawyer, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenship for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. I have been doing this for almost 10 years now, so you're in the right place if you are looking for some immigration insights. So let's start with what this parole program is, because I recently had someone come to my office and we're talking, and he tells me, "Oh, can you tell me more about this amnesty program that was announced?" And I had to tell them it is not amnesty. Okay. It is not amnesty. You're not applying to get a green card from this. This is completely separate from that. All right. So that's number one. It is not amnesty. It is not amnesty. So if you're thinking that it is, it's not. What it is parole. So right now, the US government already has several types of parole. So parole in place, meaning you're in the US and you're applying for parole in the US, and members of the military can do this for their family members. So if you are the spouse or parent of a US citizen or permanent resident, and that US citizen or permanent resident is a member of the military, you can apply for parole in place, military parole in place. Okay. And this is something that's very common that, children do for their parents or spouses do for their spouses, because if you entered the US without authorization and now you have a US citizen spouse or a US citizen child that's now 21 and older, and you want them to file for you to get a green card in the US, they can't actually do that in the US if you entered without authorization or if you entered without parole. So it's really important that we know what this thing does. So parole basically gives you an admission into the US, right? It gives you the basis where you can now apply for a green card in the US. And what typically happens is, let's say you want to file for your spouse and your spouse entered the US without a visa and without parole, you can start the I-130 process, but when it comes time for them to get a green card, they have to apply for a visa outside of the US at an embassy outside of the US, wait for that to be done. And the only way they can actually get that visa and be able to come back in is if they have a waiver, an I-601A waiver already approved. So that's additional steps, and them having to leave the US and go to an embassy for an interview after already spending all that time applying for an I-601A waiver. What this does, though, is give them parole, give them that parole, that admission into the US so that they can skip the waiver process and skip having to go outside of the US for the interview to then get an immigrant visa to then come back to the US. So it is very beneficial. So it is parole for spouses of US citizens that have been in the US for 10 years or more. And you have to have been married to your US citizen spouse as of June 17, 2024. So if you go now and get married to a US citizen, you have missed the mark. Okay. You are out of luck when it comes to that. However, if you were married to a US citizen as of June 17th, 2024, and you have been in the US for 10 years, physical presence in the US for 10 years, you can now qualify for this. So it's really important that you know who this applies to. So it's not just that you're married to a US citizen. It's not just that you live in the US. It's that you have been in the US for 10 years and you were married to a US citizen as of June 17th, 2024. All right. So that is the first thing. And then you also have to look at your history to make sure that you don't have any criminal history that can affect your ability to get this parole. Now, when I say that, people tell me about their, speeding tickets and things like that. That's not what they're really referring to here. They're looking for more serious convictions. Okay. So it's really important that we look at your criminal history to just make sure if there was a conviction, is it a serious conviction for immigration purposes? Or is it not even a conviction for immigration purposes? So it's really important that that is analyzed and you do not think that just because you have a conviction that you are automatically out of luck. All right. Now, all right. So I do see your question. Please put your questions in the comments because that's what this whole thing is about, is for you to ask me questions and for us to talk about this parole and make sure that you are getting accurate information. Can we apply for the parole if the I-130 is already in process? And is this for military only? So, can you apply for the parole if the I-130 is already in process? Yes. Okay. Yes. This parole does not stop the I-130 process. It just helps the I-130 process for if your spouse. So if you're a US citizen filing an I-130 for your spouse and your spouse did not enter the US with a visa or with parole, this fixes that. Okay. It makes it so that now they have parole and you can just go ahead and apply for a green card for them in the US. All right. So this does not stop that process. This is not something that leads to a green card on its own. You still need your US citizen spouse or child to file that green card application for you. All right. And then is this for military only? No. So there's parole in place for military, right? The military already had parole in place, and that was for people that are in the military. They can do the parole in place for their spouse and their parents. This is a separate parole. It's similar, but this is for spouses of U.S. citizens, right? This opens it up more than just for the people in the military. So that's a great question. There is military parole in place. This is just another category under parole in place. Does not require the US citizen to be in the military. Does not require the US citizen to be in the military. So that's a great question. And like I said, if you have questions, please put them in the comments because this is such a confusing topic. It is something that's new, and we are all working through it to just make sure that you are getting the information you need. Okay. If you enter the US with parole, with a visa, this is not really geared towards you because this is more for people that didn't enter with parole or or a visa to be able to have a legal entry into the US to then be able to apply for adjustment of status in the US. All right. And like I said, put your questions in the comment. All right. Next question. Is it the 601 waiver for the parole form? No. So that's a completely separate thing. So for most people, before this, right, in order to file for the spouse that entered without inspection, you will need to file an I-601A waiver form to then have that approved to then go outside of the US at an embassy. That's not this. Okay. That is not this. You are not, if you qualify for this and if this program goes through, you would not need that I-601A waiver anymore because now you have a legal entry and you can adjust your status in the US. So it's a completely separate form. They have not updated the forms to reflect this waiver. We should have more guidance on how to apply for this parole by the end of summer, right? They did say that it will come out later this summer. So we have to wait for that. You cannot apply for it today. Okay. That's really important to note. You cannot apply for this today because they have not put out that application process or guidance on how to even apply for it. All they have put out is what the requirements are, and then we just wait for later this summer when they put those out. And typically, the parole in place applications are done on a form I-131. So I hope that answered your question. And like I said, this is not amnesty. It's really important to say that because some people may think that, oh, we're just giving green cards to people. But no, this is not amnesty. This is just making the lives of US citizens that are married to foreigners a lot easier, right? It is giving relief to US citizens that have to wait years because the waiver itself, the I-601A waiver, can take up to 3 to 4 years, and then you're waiting for an interview. So that's years of waiting before your spouse can get that green card. But this shortens that waiting process, right? This will make it so that you don't have to wait that 3 to 4 years just for the waiver. You can move straight to applying for the green card once that parole is approved. It's really important to know too that this parole is on a case by case basis. They're going to look at your situation, make sure you meet all the requirements, and then go ahead and approve you. Okay. We don't know how long they're going to take to process the parole. So it's really important that you do not send anything in at this moment. So according to DHS, USCIS, you should not be sending any applications in at this time because they have not issued the guidance to on how to apply for it, and they have not updated their policy manual on what USCIS officers are supposed to do with these applications. So they have to do all of that before you can actually apply for this. Okay, really important. And one thing I want to know, and one thing that people have mentioned when it comes to this, is that it's an executive action, which means that it can be challenged in court. So if you remember when the parole for Haitians, Nicaraguans, when the parole program came out for the I-134A came out, there was a court case that said, hey, people challenged whether the president can provide this parole. And guess what? The court said they can. So this is similar to that, right? This is a parole. It's not given status. It's just given parole into the US. So it is different from, let's say, DACA, because we know DACA went through the courts. It had its issues. It still has its issues. And the president tried to do the DAPA for the parents of DACA recipients. And that is in limbo because it's just not happening. So it's really important that we understand that there is a difference. Can this be challenged in court? Yes. But it has a better chance. Okay, it can be challenged in court, but it has a better chance of going through and being approved by the courts because it's a parole program and we already have military parole in place and we already have parole for Nicaraguans, Haitians, and all of that. So parole is very much under the purview of the president. And because they put it under that, there's a great chance that this will be applied and the courts will not strike it down. So that is great. And that's what we want. Okay. We want these announcements to have legal backing and be strong and we don't have to come back. I don't have to come back here and tell you, oh, it's not happening, right? This is really important for, like I said, spouses of foreigners that are US citizens that are waiting years and years and years just for a waiver to be approved, to then go outside of the US, to then get a visa and then come back to the US. This will cut that waiting time, and the spouse will not have to leave the US if the waiver is approved. So it's really important. And like I said, we will have more guidance as far as how to apply for this and when they're starting to take applications later this summer. So I will, of course, be updating you all on any new news on this topic because it is so important. And like I said, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. So I have clients where I already know, like we already have a list of the clients this is going to help and how we're going to basically wait for it to be applied and start their application process immediately. So it's really, really important that you stay tuned because I will be giving you more updates. So now that we know what this parole is, it is parole. It's a 3-year parole, and you would get a work permit for that 3-year period. But the goal for this parole is that within that 3-year period, you and your US citizen spouse are applying for that green card. Okay, that is the purpose of it, to give you that legal entry into the US, and then you can apply for your green card in the US. So there are people that the parole is not necessarily going to help if you have a permanent bar, meaning you are banned from getting a green card in the US anyway. You may just get the parole for 3 years, have a work permit, but not be able to adjust your status. So that this will not cure a permanent bar. So if you have a permanent bar, you can still get the parole, but the parole will not fix the fact that you have a permanent bar. The parole will fix the fact that you entered the US without authorization. But if you already have a permanent bar, it will not fix that. All right. So how do you prepare? Right now, you know what it is, what it's not. Like I said, it's not amnesty. You're not just going from getting the parole to applying for a green card. You still need a US citizen spouse or a US citizen child that's over the age of 21 to file that green card application for you. So it's really important that we understand you're not going from parole to a green card. You are going from parole to having your spouse or your child file a green card application for you. All right. Now, what can you do to prepare yourself? All right. We know we're getting the guidance this summer, later on this summer. We know we're getting that. We're going to know what form. Most likely it's going to be form I-131, and they're just going to update the instructions on how to apply for this specific parole in place. Okay. So, one, of course, you need proof of your marriage. You need your marriage certificate. And if you don't know where that is, or if you need to request it, please go ahead and request it. If it's in a different language, you want to make sure that you get that translated as soon as possible and just have it. All right, because you need to send the marriage certificate with the translation if the marriage certificate is not in English. Then you need proof of your physical presence in the US. This is really important because you need to show that you have been in the US for at least 10 years. Okay? At least 10 years physically in the US is what they're looking for here. So if you have not been in the US for at least 10 years, you're not going to qualify for this. But if you have been in the US for at least 10 years, you just need documentation to prove it. So bank statements, tax returns, any documentation that shows that you are physically here. Okay, that's what you're looking at. So you can get school records, medical records. If you have children in the US, you can also include their school records and their medical records showing that they've lived with you. You can get statements from community members, from your job, from literally everyone that knows you and have known you for the 10 years or at some point in that 10-year period. So let's say someone knew you from 2000 and 20 from 2020 to now, they can only write a statement that you have been in the US from 2020 to now. They cannot go back and say, oh, and she told me that she's been here for 10 years. That's not going to work for these statements. It's people that have actually known you for that time period and can state specific times that they have been in your presence for that 10-year period. Okay. And it doesn't have to be one person for the whole 10 years, right? It can be for different chunks of time that they knew you. All right. Again, the medical records can be from different chunks of time, school records, because those things show that you are physically here. Employment records are a great one too to have because, again, it shows that you were physically here because the only way, right? Hear me out. The only way for you to have those employment records, to have those medical records, to have those school records, if you were here. So that's what you can prepare. Just start getting those documentation together to show your physical presence in the US because it really does matter. Okay, when it comes to this program, it really does matter being able to show your physical presence in the US because it is a requirement. Um, and you want to also look at mail that you received. So if you have mail and you can show like years, if you keep your mail that long, right, you can use that as well. So you just need things to show that you have been physically present in the US. And you want to look at, if you've had any criminal history, you want to look at those to make sure, right? Schedule a consultation. Let's make sure that's not going to be a conviction for immigration purposes, or it's not going to lead to you not being able to qualify for this, because that is part of the requirements. You need to pass this background check. And if you have any serious criminal history, you can be prohibited from getting this parole because, again, this is purely discretion. Okay, this is up to USCIS whether to grant it or not. It's not like they must grant it. All right, so they're looking on a case by case basis here. So that is the parole program, right? We're going to be waiting till later this summer to get more detail on how you can actually apply for this and where to send the applications and what form to use and all of that. We are going to have to wait for that. But in the meantime, we know what the requirements are. Right? We know what the requirements are, and we can start preparing the documents required for that and be ready to show those things. Now, let's talk about who will benefit from this. So, if you're listening to this and you are in a situation where you know you have to file an I-601A waiver, or you're in immigration court and you need to file cancellation of removal, because in order for you to get cancellation of removal, you need to have 10 years of physical presence in the US. So you can already prove the 10 years of physical presence. Now you have this. And if you are in removal proceedings, but when you were put in removal proceedings, you did not have up to 10 years. Let's say you had like 8 years. But as of June 17th, you had 10 years. This parole can help you because you can show 10 years of physical presence, even though it wouldn't have helped you to get the cancellation of removal in immigration court. You now have the 10 years for this parole. So it's really important that you look at all your options. And that's what literally this is. It's an option for people that entered without inspection. The only thing that, of course, we wish it was less than 10 years of physical presence in the US, because that will cover more people. We wish that it covered parents of US citizens that are here without inspection. But we take what we can get. And this gives so many families options. And we like options. over here in the immigration world. So if you have any questions about this parole program or any other immigration things that's going on with you and you want to ask, feel free to put them in the comments. If you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments as well. So I do have a question here. How long does it often take to receive the EAD and travel card through a VAWA application? So typically after you do your biometrics, you're looking at 6 to 8 months for the EAD. If they choose to process them together, then you'll get them together. So the EAD and the travel card can be separated. So the EAD is 6 to 8 months. The travel card, if it's not processed with the EAD, you're looking at up to a year for that. All right. So if you have any other questions, like I said, go ahead, put them in the comments. But if I don't see any questions, thank you so much for joining me. I am truly appreciative of your time. And oh, by the way, if you got value out of this video and you're still here, go ahead and hit that like button. Really appreciate it. Just lets me know that you're interested in this topic and you want more information on breaking immigration news. All right. And like I said, if you have questions, put them in the comments. If you're watching this on a replay, put your questions in the comments as well. Thank you all so much for joining me. And I look forward to talking to you next week on Friday, where we are going to be doing the Q&A. So if you watch this video and you have questions, you take your time to digest all this information and you have questions, bring them to next week, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join me, bring your questions, and I will be responding to your questions live. It's a Q&A next week. All right. So I will see you then. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Bye.